When you hear the name Mangusta, your mind probably immediately goes to the 1960s Detomaso Mangusta, which was Detomaso's first full-on production car. It was gorgeous, it handled well, and it was one of the first commercially available mid-engine supercars on a world stage. Its name, though, was carefully chosen as a dig at Carroll Shelby and his Cobras because of a business deal between Carroll and Detomaso going south. Nonetheless, that Mangusta concluded its short 400-car production run in 1971, and that name would be shuttered for 3 decades, until Detomaso decided to revive the nameplate for one last hurrah on a car that shared almost nothing in common with its original namesake. But before long, Alejandro Detomaso himself would grow tired of the development of the car and, amid his late-life health woes, stepped away from the project altogether. This new car was no longer a Detomaso, but it would still be referred to as the Mangusta, penned by one of the most famous automotive designers of all time and powered by the underpinnings of Ford's SVT Cobra. What would become known as the Qvale Mangusta was one strange-looking muscle car that no one asked for. To understand the landscape that brought us this Mustang in an Italian suit, we first need to take a peek behind the curtain and look at how Detomaso was doing at the time in terms of the company. At the start of the 1980s, Detomaso was still producing the Pantera, its most successful and well-known model. The Pantera had gained a strong foothold in the United States thanks to Ford's backing in the early 1970s. But when Ford ended its partnership in 1974, Detomaso was left to fend for itself. Despite this, the Pantera soldiered on in limited numbers throughout the 1980s, primarily appealing to niche enthusiasts rather than mainstream buyers. At the same time, Detomaso himself had diversified his business interests by acquiring struggling Italian luxury brands like Maserati, Innocenti, and Benelli. Maserati in particular became a major focus, and under Detomaso's ownership, the company introduced models like the Maserati Biturbo, a car that initially showed promise but ultimately gained a reputation for reliability issues and piss-poor build quality. This diversification strategy spread Detomaso's resources thin. While Alejandro Detomaso was known for his strong personality and ambitious vision, he often lacked the financial backing to execute his ideas fully. He managed to secure government support for Maserati in the form of subsidies, but the company's products failed to generate sustained success, and by the late 1980s, Maserati was in deep financial trouble. And by 1993, Detomaso was forced to sell his majority stake in the company to Fiat, effectively losing control of the brand. With control of Maserati gone, Detomaso was left with little more than the aging Pantera and an ever-dwindling customer base. The company attempted to refresh the Pantera with updated versions like the Pantera 90 SI, which featured a more modern design penned by Marcello Gandini. But by this point, the car was outdated and could no longer compete with the high-tech supercars of the 90s. Detomaso also explored new projects, but it seemed that every one failed to gain traction. One attempt was the Detomaso Guara, a lightweight sports car introduced in '93. While it had an exotic appearance and advanced materials like a composite body, it was produced in extremely low numbers, less than 50 cars, and it never achieved commercial success. By the mid-1990s, Alejandro Detomaso himself was facing serious health issues. After suffering a stroke in '93, his ability to effectively lead the company was severely diminished. This, combined with Detomaso's financial difficulties, meant that the company was running on fumes. With Detomaso's existing lineup essentially irrelevant in the marketplace, the company needed something new. This led to the development of the Detomaso Bijoux, a project initiated by Maserati's former technical director, Giordano Carissini, who was inspired by the success of the British sports car maker TVR. He had a multitude of business trips to the UK during his tenure with Maserati, and he was astounded at the rapid growth that TVR was experiencing with their new lightweight V8 sports cars. He thought the goal should be to create a lightweight, fun-to-drive roadster with an affordable and American V8 powertrain, essentially what was their own TVR. The Bijoux was shown at the 1996 Geneva Motor Show, but by this point, detomaso was too weak financially to bring the car to market on its own. That's where Qvale came in. He was a Norwegian-American businessman with deep roots in the automotive industry. He was actually one of the largest British car importers in the United States. And seeing the potential in the Bijoux, Qvale agreed to fund its production under the condition that it would be badged initially as the detomaso Mangusta, because the detomaso name had some weight to it still. However, as development progressed, tensions flared between detomaso and Qvale, two strong-willed industry veterans who had conflicting visions. By 1999, their relationship had severely deteriorated, so much so that detomaso withdrew his name from the project entirely, leaving Qvale to launch the car under his own brand, still as the Mangusta. With Qvale's funding secured, the newly rebranded Mangusta needed a powertrain, but rather than engineering something bespoke or sourcing an exotic European motor, the team took the easiest and most cost-effective route possible. They went straight to Ford and lifted nearly the entire drivetrain from the 1999 Mustang SVT Cobra. Now, detomaso was no stranger to borrowing parts from Ford to build their cars, but in this case, they didn't borrow just the engine and transmission. They borrowed pretty much all of the Mustang's mechanical DNA as well. At the heart of this new Mangusta sat Ford's 4.6-liter dual overhead cam 32-valve modular V8, the exact same engine found in the Mustang Cobra, producing 320 horsepower at 6,000 RPM and 314 foot-pounds of torque at 4,800 RPM. It was a solid performer for the time, but nothing unique to the Mangusta itself. The aluminum block power plant with its twin overhead cams came straight from the Ford production line without any serious modifications, which meant that the Mangusta's acceleration figures of 0 to 60 in 5.3 seconds and top speed of 160 were essentially identical to those of the Mustang Cobra. Power was sent to the rear wheels through a Tremec T45 5-speed manual transmission. Again, the exact same gearbox found in the Mustang Cobra, right down to the gear ratios. Even the limited slip differential in the car was sourced from an Australian supplier who commonly provided Ford with parts for its rear-wheel drive platforms. Now, although the Mangusta attempted to separate itself with that Gandini styling, which was very controversial, and some suspension upgrades, its Mustang roots were still glaringly obvious. One look inside of the Mangusta's interior will show you just how similar the dash layout is to that of the Mustang. And while the Mangusta could claim to be an Italian-engineered sports car, at its core, it was little more than a Mustang Cobra in a fancier suit, with a much higher price tag. Braking performance was serious, with Brembo-supplied vented disc brakes at all four corners. The front rotors measured 12 inches in diameter, and the rear were 11.7 inches, each paired with 4-piston calipers to ensure strong and consistent stopping power. Surprisingly, though, the Mangusta did not come equipped with ABS. The car's road grip came courtesy of Michelin Pilot Sport tires wrapped around 18-inch Pantera wheels, which were a $2,300 option at the time. These wide, low-profile tires help give the Mangusta some pretty good stability, though its skid pad performance of just 0.8 G suggested that it leaned more towards grand touring than outright performance. Nonetheless, the Qvale Mangusta struggled to find its place in the market. With an MSRP of $84,000 in 1999, it was 3 times more expensive than the Mustang Cobra that it shared much of its parts with. The Mangusta was priced essentially directly against the Porsche 911 Carrera 4 Cabriolet and the Mercedes-Benz SL500. These competitors, although less exclusive, did carry well-known badges, had better interiors, and had less divisive designs, which made them an easy choice for most buyers in that price range. Meanwhile, the Mangusta was an enigma. It was too exotic to be considered an American muscle car and far too pricey, and too American to be embraced as a true exotic, and still too peculiar looking to win over traditional Grand Tourer buyers. Even though this was a Gandini-designed car, who is one of the best designers of all time, I just don't think this car looks that good. And Qvale, despite being a major figure in automotive distribution, he was not a recognized automaker, and the Mangusta lacked the brand prestige of all of its competition. Qvale was essentially starting from scratch, with a car that required significant explanation just to be properly understood. Potential buyers who walked into a dealership often met the car with confusion, leading to countless moments where even experienced enthusiasts had no idea what they were looking at, which is not a good recipe for sales success. By the time production ended in 2002, only 284 units had been built, a dismal number for what was supposed to be Qvale's grand entry into the high-performance sports car market. For reference, Porsche was selling thousands upon thousands of 911s that year, and even the lower volume brands like Aston Martin were still moving far more cars annually than Qvale ever could. The lack of sales sealed the Mangusta's fate, and with it, Qvale's dream of becoming a full-fledged automaker evaporated. But yet somehow the Mangusta did not completely disappear into obscurity. In a weird twist of fate, the car's underpinnings were sold to a company called the Phoenix Consortium, which had recently acquired MG Rover, and from its ashes the Mangusta's chassis would go on to form the foundation of the MG X-Power SV, a wild, short-lived high-performance coupe that was somehow even more obscure than its predecessor. I'll be frank guys, this is a pretty weird car, and there's not a lot of information out there about it, so I tried to consolidate it here as best I could. But let me know what you think about this car, particularly from a styling perspective. I think it's pretty controversial, and I really don't see how many people would have bought this over a 911 or an SL 500 back in the day. But let me know if you disagree. And again, thank you all for sticking with me and watching yet another video. Until next time, enthusiasts.